In today's episode, we're inviting you into a conversation that feels both sacred and expansive. We sat down with Zach Helton, former pastor and author of Meta Valley Gospel, to explore what it means to hold faith without needing all the answers, to loosen our grip on certainty and allow curiosity, humility, and love to lead instead. We talk about the power of asking why we believe what we believe and what alternative perspectives actually do for our faith, not to pull us away from Jesus, but to deepen our understanding of him and help us live his teachings more fully. Together, we explore how we define Christianity, who gets to be called a Christian, and why learning from other religions or spiritual practices doesn't have to threaten our faith. In many cases, they can offer tangible, practical tools and ways to embody compassion, presence, forgiveness, and love in our everyday lives. This conversation isn't about abandoning belief, it's about expanding love. It's about honoring our faith in Jesus while remaining open, teachable, and grounded in the fruits of the Spirit. If you've ever felt tension between faith and curiosity, if you've ever wondered whether learning from others could actually help you live your faith more authentically, this episode is for you. And with that, let's dive in.
We're so excited to have you. I mean, what's really cool, Zach, is that we've been following you for a while. You're a content creator that we instantly connected with. And as you know, Spirit Outspoken, we're exploring mysticism and rediscovering Jesus in places that maybe we've been afraid to look in before. And you're kind of ahead in leading a lot of those conversations. So we're personally super excited. And I know our listeners are going to just love what you have to share. So, I mean, I would just love to learn, like, tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey. You were in the evangelical space and now somewhere very different. And we would just love to
A
hear
little bit,
kind of
yeah.
how that started.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up evangelical, hardcore Southern Baptist, and I took it really seriously. I think more than, like, my parents, anticipated me taking it. So, like, I remember, sitting in, the sanctuary of our church. I might have been, like, middle school age and, like, listening to the preacher saying, "We have to go and preach the gospel because we have to save people from hell when they
Mhm.
die. And if we don't, then they're gonna go to hell." And I remember thinking, like if the stakes are this high, how are you all just sitting here? Like, how are we not outside right now, like standing on our cars and telling everybody this is true? So I remember having that kind of disconnect at like an early age to be like, if you're telling me God is real and these are the stakes, I can't think of anything more interesting. Like, what else are we spending our life? I'm going to go be an accountant? Like, what are you talking about? Uh, no, no disrespect to accountants. Everybody has their calling. But my middle school brain was like, if we're going to say this is real, we have to take it seriously.
Mm,
Um, and
yeah.
so I did. And I think the effect of that over time, it made me like a real jerk, because I have these truth claims that I'm holding on to very tightly. I have the light, everybody else is in darkness, and I'm going to, bestow upon you the truth. Number two, it took me into seminary. And in seminary, I started to have my first dealings with generalized anxiety disorder. And when you deal with generalized anxiety, oftentimes it moves into depression because you're like, is it always going to be like this? I'm miserable all the time. And I leaned really hard into my beliefs to try to fix it. If I just cling harder, like I'll be better. And it didn't work. And so it manifested for a while as like heart issues, like, heart palpitations. And I remember going to a cardiologist in Waco, Texas, and saying like, "This is my issue. I'm scared." And he like looked me over and he was like, "You don't have any physical issues. Maybe you should try memorizing more Bible verses." And I was like, "Oh my God, like
Oh, no.
I'm never gonna get out of this." Yeah, that was his professional medical advice to me. Um, so I just so happened at the time to be in a class called Wilderness Spirituality at my seminary, and it was a summer class that I had kind of added last minute, and it touched on mystical traditions in the Christian tradition, and as part of that was experimenting in liturgy and like fixed hour prayer, and mindfulness meditation was one of the things they wanted us to try. And to me, that's like Eastern heresy. Like I wasn't, interested, but I was getting desperate. I was like, anything that will
And
help
this was
me get
in
out of this.
seminary school.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in my early 20s at this point. Um, so I download the Headspace app, which was like just getting off the ground, and started that. And from the moment I started this like mindfulness practice, it reformatted my hard drive. I like started to get in touch with something in myself that was loving and peaceful and kind. And I started to ask myself, like, is that God? Like, am I experiencing God? And there
Hmm.
was this story at the time that became really important to me. I don't know if you're fans of Anthony DeMello. He's a Jesuit priest and psychotherapist, but he collects these great wisdom stories, and one of them is about this explorer that like goes off and explores the Amazon and creates this great map of the Amazon and like brings it back and gives it to his people and is like, use this map to go explore the Amazon. And instead of doing that, they like frame the map and study it. And they talk about the map all the time and they memorize the map and they never actually step into the Amazon. And so I remember having this experience and feeling like I've stepped into the Amazon, like I'm experiencing this thing that I've been learning about and talking about for so long. And so that changed everything for me. So, fast forward now, I'm a ordained minister and a writer, and like you said, a content creator, and that's where I am. So that might have been a long-winded, that's where I'm coming
No,
from.
no, so much of that resonates with me. So I too suffered from anxiety and was at the point of panic attacks and just it really being disruptive to my day-to-day life. And it was through meditation as well that really got me grounded and opened me up spiritually to so many different things that I maybe had been told were off limits or just never considered looking at previously. And one of the things that I love that you shared recently on your Instagram was how you call yourself a Christian Buddhist because we talk about it all the time on our show, but it's amazing how when we kind of did our little, we call it our walkabout, right? Like our spiritual walkabout, where we started tapping into different religious practices and spiritual practices, how it has made our Christianity so much deeper and more tangible. And we have been able to experience God in such a beautiful, profound, new, and different way. So, can you just speak about that a little bit? Because I think sometimes people hear that and they're like, what? That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. Um, but it really can be an amazing process to walk through.
Really? Yes. I think the best definition that I've heard for theology is faith-seeking understanding. Like you have this experience, and now we're trying to put words to it and figure out what's going on. So everything was really grounded for me in that mindfulness experience and feeling like, what does it mean to experience God? And then started looking for language for that, framework for that. Richard Rohr was very helpful to me early on because I think he speaks Christian really well. That's his native language, and he's bringing in these traditions. Um, and then I kind of happened upon Thich Nhat Hanh, who became a really important teacher for me. And Thich Nhat Hanh, I noticed, would use Jesus's teachings with ease. As he's like teaching Buddhism, he'd be like, yeah, it's like Jesus said, such and such, which, it took me off guard because in my mind, these exist in different silos. Um, and hearing Jesus's words in the mouths of other teachers from different spiritual traditions really made it come alive for me in these new ways. Things that never really made much sense to me, or I tried to force to make some kind of sense. Suddenly I was like, oh, yeah, in this greater landscape of spirituality, this is very practical. This makes a lot of sense. And, from Thich Nhat Hanh, um, the comedian Pete Holmes actually turned me on to Alan Watts and Ram Dass and these other teachers, Eckhart Tolle, who all do the same thing of quoting
Hmm.
Jesus, as easily as anything. Yeah. And so I don't remember where this image comes from, but the image that has stuck with me is like, when you're practicing this tradition, whatever your religious spiritual tradition, you're going down deep. And if you go down deep enough, you hit this big underground aquifer, right? Of spirituality, this common thing everybody has. And everybody's kind of drilling their different wells. And it's manifesting in these unique ways, depending on how you're digging the well, how you're constructing this well. But then because we can't see the aquifer underground, we all want to say, like, I've got the well. This is the only one. And sometimes, you pay me and I'll give you the water, not knowing that it's for everybody and everybody has access to it.
That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw you say something recently that really caught my attention in terms of how we've sort of oversimplified Jesus and we've put him in this box. And that's something that's always really intrigued me about mysticism because when I look at Jesus, I see somebody that was super radical. He was healing people, he was teaching us how to heal people, he was transcending time and space and doing all these incredible things. And we've just distilled it down to this very simplified story of like sin and savior. And like there isn't much more beyond that when truly his story was so complex and so interesting. I guess I'd be really interested in hearing your take on some people's theories of the lost years of Jesus. You know, like where did he go? What did he learn? Because clearly he was influenced, right? But we think very intentionally don't know where
Yeah.
he went and what he learned, right? So would love your perspective on that.
Yeah. I first want to say that, that what you're saying about Jesus being radical and doing these radical things, I think by reducing him to, these doctrines and things to believe in, we make him safe. It only benefits the people in power, right? Who want to use him to influence us to do things. Um, I did not hear the stories of how much Jesus managed to piss off religious authorities all the time.
All the
The
time.
legalistic
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
people around him. I didn't grow up hearing the story of Jesus in conflict with religious leaders. If you're a religious leader, you're a good guy, right? It's so much
Hmm.
more complicated and interesting. As far as the lost years, so like I want to lead by saying I don't know, and I'm always deeply skeptical of anyone who knows,
Hmm.
Totally.
But I think it's such uh, fertile ground for spiritual creativity and imagination, and finding these resonances between what Jesus does and the different cultures and religious teachings around him. There's a reading of that where you could say, maybe the most boring and possibly most historical accurate, right? Where these ideas come in on trade routes and he's just like paying attention and he's absorbing these, different bits of Eastern traditions and Greek philosophies and things like that. And they're working into the Judean context when he's in. You can also get a lot more creative. And there's a lot of traditions that do and tell these really cool stories. So like, obviously the one that really got my attention, exploring this overlap between Christianity and Buddhism, is this Nicholas Novodovich story. Novodovich, I always say his name wrong. Where you have this Russian explorer, according to him, he breaks his leg, he gets brought to a Buddhist monastery. And while he's there, he's learning, the teachings and culture and things like that. And they bring him this document. It's called the Life of Saint Isa, Best of Men, and explain like this is the story of Jesus while he was with us, how we knew him, our tradition. And Nadovich brings this back, this story of like this Jesus apparently like during these missing years traveled the world and wound up spending the season in a Buddhist monastery. And this story is, first of all, almost immediately shut down. Academics like go to this place and the monks who he said showed him these things are like, we don't know what you're talking about. So like there's a lot of a lot of gray area around, did this
So we'll
happen?
take it
I
with a
don't
Yeah.
grain of salt, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still so intrigued.
So I'm more interested in what this story does to us, right? So it's
Mhm.
also very possible that he has compiled into a concise narrative all of these legends and local stories about, because there are plenty of traditions outside of the story he's telling, that come from this area that say like, yeah, Jesus was here, Jesus was with us. There are some that would go so far as to say like, yeah, Jesus was with us, went to Judea, and then came back, and we can show you exactly where he's buried. So
Mm.
like some people get really specific about it, whether
Yeah.
you want to believe it or not. What's interesting to me is what that does to our reading of the Jesus story. If we have a Jesus that did spend a season in a Buddhist monastery, how does that open up the way that we hear some of his teachings? How does that put him in conversation? Which is what I tried to do with Meta Valley Gospel, this novel that just came out, is re-narrating Jesus, the Jesus story, with him as a radical, as someone who is pushed to the margins of his tradition, who is in constant conflict with his religious authorities, which I imagine would lead to this experience of something like religious trauma and some experience like deconstruction. So a Jesus who experienced that, what does that story look like? And then if we have this Jesus who went to a Buddhist monastery and what I wanted to do was take some of these fundamental Jesus teachings, the kingdom of God is at hand, and have him learn them from someone else, like from a Buddhist teacher, and explore what does that do to the way we hear them, and how it makes them more spiritually expansive and practical and interesting. So I'm more interested in like what that story does to us than what is historically true, you know? But yeah, that's a very interesting place to explore. From I don't know if you've ever read Lamb, the Gospel According to Jesus' Friend Biff, by Christopher Moore.
Oh.
It's a comedy, and like he goes for the punchline all the time, but it was also really important to me early on, as this like irreverent telling of the Jesus story of him as a human who travels to these different, you know, cultures to like learn different things, and the whole thing's narrated by his irreverent best friend Biff, you know, who just like wants to be a buddy and keep him safe. Highly recommend.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said a couple things I want to respond to. So, one of the things is like having curiosity and creativity and how we interpret certain things about Jesus. That
Mhm.
to some Christians who have been told exactly who he is and exactly what we need to believe about him are going to have a strong reaction. But I light up when I hear this because I think like when we're giving ourselves room to explore and to experience. Like that is the biggest word I think is like when we look at alternative, you know, air quotes, alternative spirituality, which I would argue, you know, exploring Buddhism and Christianity feel very complementary. But I think a lot of people would say, like, okay, that's alternative. I think it gives us an opportunity to feel Jesus so deeply and in such a magical way versus just hearing about him. And I think that has been our experience through deconstructing. And I don't know, I just love how you said creativity and exploration and like it's almost like whimsical, like the way that's the word I'm
Mhm.
thinking about. It's like you're not taking religion so seriously anymore. You're like, wait, like, is there a different way that I can look at Jesus? And if I do, how does that connect me to him in a different, more meaningful way? And I don't know, it's like giving ourselves permission to do the unthinkable, which within the confines of fundamentalism or, you know, in the evangelical space, that's forbidden. That's forbidden. But the way that you talk about Jesus, it's like such a genuine way. I'm enjoying this conversation because you said something in the beginning too. Like, I realized I was just like kind of a jerk. Like, I had all the answers. I had all the light. And like, I've gone through my own experience where I've reflected and been like, damn, I was kind of an asshole. I was like super self righteous and you're the sinner and I'm the saint. And come over to the light side and I've got all the answers. And really, that's absurd because, you know, even if you're thinking about just Jesus's lost years, there's so much we don't know. And I love the humility that you even bring to that question. Like, I don't really know, but what does it do by just exploring these questions? And I think that's the beautiful thing. Like, how does it make us feel? How does it make us experience Jesus in a way that we haven't before?
Absolutely. I think you use whimsy, which I think is such a great word. I immediately think about Jesus teaching kids and playing with kids and be like, it's to these
Mhm.
that the kingdom belongs. And his disciples are like, that's embarrassing. What are you talking about? Like, that's what I picture Peter walking in to be like,
Get it
this is
together.
not good for our image. Like, if you want people to take you seriously, and Jesus is like, not really, not like that. No. They get it more than you do. And I think that you talked about the, you know, how we're scared of these different interpretations, the rigidity around the right way to tell the story, which I think, you know, on one level comes from this egoic need to just know what's going on, you know, that often goes unchecked. But I also think there's a different level on which this is by design. I think we have teachers who know how to play these stories to hold on to power. And whether that's
Mhm.
happening consciously or subconsciously, I don't know. You know, I don't think Southern Baptist pastors wake up every day and they're like, how do I hold on to my power today? But that is the function, you know, of the way
Yeah.
that we tell these stories. We make people afraid to see the
Mhm.
story any differently than how we tell them that they need to see it. Which I think is incredibly ironic given how much I was taught that Christianity is about a personal relationship with Jesus. And then when
Right.
I started experiencing that personal relationship and the spirit that Paul would write about, the fruits of the spirit, then what I got in response from the institution was like, no, not like that though. Like, but
Right.
that's
Too much
wrong.
So
happiness,
Like,
true.
Zach.
I
that
know.
is
Too much
threatening to
happiness and
us.
peace for you. Like
Yeah.
you gotta,
Right.
you need to be a little bit more depressed in your Christianity. But
Yes.
seriously, like it's interesting. It's like we're painted this image of what it should look like, and then when we find it and it's not the right way, that's wrong. And I really connect with, and I know Rachel already shared about like her personal story with different mental health stuff and her spirituality. that was my experience too. I've had such transformative experiences through meditation and through deep, deep thought with my Christianity. And it's like those experiences are what are defining my spirituality, because it's like, well, I can't feel that and also be living under fear. Because, like, once you really feel the
Mhm.
presence of God and it does bring forward the fruits of the Spirit, it feels so genuine and so good. It's like, I'm just going to keep following that despite the fact that you're telling me I'm a heretic, I'm going to hell, I'm doing all these things, because it's like I can't reconcile those two anymore. It's like once you really experience it in a way and have a framework to your suggestion, like sometimes, we hear in the Bible, like, fear not, be anxious for nothing. It's like, okay, I get that, but like how? And
Mhm.
sometimes you need tools that expand outside of what are just told, like the peace that you can have. It's like, okay, get it. I get it. But I'm a human having a human experience. Like, how do I do that? And meditation and a lot of these practices within Buddhism are sometimes the how. The point is exactly to what Jesus has told us the experience can be by having the kingdom within, So it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all pointing to the same God and the same experience. It's just allowing ourselves
Yeah.
permission to explore it.
So well said, Jace.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a huge moment for me to, I went through a season where I was like trying to dive deep into sutras, and can I just absorb this tradition? And when I found a sutra called the Better Way to Catch a Snake.
Wait,
Do
will
you
you
know this?
explain what a sutra
No.
is? Will
So,
you
oh, I'm sorry.
explain?
So,
Yeah.
sutra is like a
Yep.
Buddhist scripture.
Oh, okay.
And Buddhists have a very different relationship to sacred scripture than we do. We've created this idolized canon. A Buddhist canon, depending on the tradition, could take up a whole, bookshelf, a whole library. So it's more fluid. So the texts feel very different. So there's this one sutra called The Better Way to Catch a Snake. And usually the way that these sutras play out is like a disciple comes to the Buddha and asks a question, and then the Buddha explores the question, and then they talk about the implications, and that's like the teaching. And in this one, the Buddha, he focuses on this image of catching a snake. And he's like, spirituality is like trying to catch a snake. You could just say, okay, go catch a snake. And people would be hurt, like trying to do this, grabbing onto the tail of a snake. The snake comes up and bites you. He's like, what I care about is trying to help people by saying, go into the forest, find a forked stick, put the stick right behind the snake's head so it can't move the head, then reach down and you have the snake. And so not only have I said, okay, the goal of this is to catch a snake, but I have said, here is a method by which you can safely catch a snake. And I read
Mhm.
that and I thought, oh, this is the story of my spirituality. I feel like I have heard this teaching, go love your neighbor, go be not afraid. Zero practical tools other than like grit your teeth and willpower it for how to do that. And then you have the Buddhist tradition coming in to be like, yes, absolutely. All those things Jesus is saying, we catch the snake, we love people, we be not afraid. And these are the tools, these are the methods we can use to practically do that. And if we don't, we wind up getting bitten. We wind up in this state of anxiety and depression because we've used all our willpower and it didn't work. We wind up
Mhm.
creating communities that haven't dealt with their own suffering, and so they just perpetuate it and push it off onto others. Yeah, so that's I totally agree. Like I see them as complementary. Here is the what and here is a how, and they work well together, so well together.
Gosh. Yeah. I've talked openly on this platform that have you ever done meta meditation?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was saying that for me was the tool for forgiveness.
Mm.
I was lugging around things for years that I wasn't able to let go of because, we're preached at all the time forgive, forgive, forgive. But to your point, no one tells me how. So
How do
I,
I do that? Yeah.
slap a smile on my face and fake it and,
Absolutely.
don't really heal and deal with any of the strong undercurrent of emotions that I'm feeling. And then meta was like this beautiful gift of true release, true release for
Yeah.
myself of respecting them as an individual, respecting myself, honoring them, honoring me, allowing myself to just feel everything, but honestly release it. And the freedom I felt with that, which is why we're encouraged to forgive. Like it frees
Yeah.
us from lugging all these heavy, hard feelings around. So I agree 100%. It's just such a useful, tangible way to work through some of these spiritual practices for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great example, and I think I'm thinking of forgiveness specifically, and I think it's a lot more difficult for women in the Christian tradition because there is that expectation you will just forgive and keep going and be happy and serve.
Mm-hmm.
All these gender expectations get layered on top of it. But I'm thinking of a friend who is in ministry who went through a really messy divorce and kept getting this advice from people around her, like, you have to forgive him, and when you forgive him, you'll feel so much better. And so, like, I try, I grit my
No,
teeth and
does
try,
But
not
I hate
work.
him,
when
though.
it doesn't work, right? And then she had someone come into her life who said, like, I want you to take forgiveness and I want you to put it in a drawer and don't worry about it right now. There's so much work that you can do before you even get there. And forgiveness, I think at its most like healthy understanding, is not a thing that you force, but a thing that grows. Like
Mhm.
you plant a seed and you nurture the seed, and forgiveness is one of the fruits. You can't focus on the fruit. You focus on nurturing the seed and let it grow. Uh
That's
and
beautiful.
Yes, that's such a good way to think of it
It
that I've
really
never
is.
thought of before.
I know. And like, I feel like there's so many unhealthy things that sometimes come out of Christianity around like spiritual bypassing. You can't really feel it. You just got to like be a good Christian and put on a brave face. And I think that that's
Mhm.
so unfortunate because like Jesus wept. He showed a broad range of emotions, right? And it's like
yeah.
he was the most human. He showed us the path, right? But we're also looking at this and being like, okay, but like how do I apply this to the argument I just got into with my coworker? I'm here fighting fake arguments in my head because I have such a strong reaction. My nervous system is completely dysregulated. And it's like, how do I address the physical manifestation of what it's like to be a human and then not go through this shame spiral of like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling to do the thing I'm being commanded to do, but I can't even just get my heart rate to calm down, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I just feel like we get into these loops and it's really not productive. And I really thought that like being a good Christian for a very long time was like completely to deny the negative emotions that I was having. Like, I mean,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
really,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't
The
until
only real
like,
Christian's a happy Christian, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, I'm talking about navigating some like really tough life changing stuff. And it was like, no, I'm going to show how faithful I am by only talking about the positive things. And meanwhile, it's like I'm terrified. And I felt like I couldn't admit that, not only to like other people, but even to myself. And it was like, as soon as
Yeah.
I was able to do some of that shadow work, which honestly like does not exist in the Christian realm of spirituality. Like shadow work to me, I was like, that sounds like what we don't do. Like the shadows, the dark side, we're just love and light over here, right? And that is really where I think Jesus can meet us in our raw experience to like truly transform us. You know what I mean? Like I almost feel like it's like we
100%.
we
Yeah.
keep our spirituality so like surface level and yet like Jesus showed us such a deeper way. And kind of looking outside and peeking behind like some of those Buddhist practices, I really like I don't know. I feel like it's so complementary and will help us like just deepen our faith in such a meaningful way. You
Yeah.
seem so zen, Zach. I'm like, how do I be like you? Like, am I now a
You.
Buddhist
That's
Christian? Like, is
Baby. Yeah. Meditate. No.
uh, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about how much it shook me in a really helpful spiritual way when I came across the Buddha's Four Noble Truths for the first time. The noble truth number one: there is suffering. Period. Like that's where you start. Is there is suffering. Number two is like, it goes on to, you have to look deeply into it, find the causes for it, address the causes for it, and live in such a way that nurture the seeds of well-being. But coming from a tradition that didn't necessarily have that, that gave me eyes to then go back into my Christian tradition and see like how essential Good Friday is. We preach the resurrection, but not so much the death. And without both of them, the story is no good. The
Mhm.
story, it doesn't resonate. It's not real. And I'm thinking about when I was a pastor and I would plan the Good Friday service and then plan the Easter service. There were several Good Friday services where it was just no one would show up. I mean, not no one. There was always a few people, but I remember one congregant saying like, "Hey, sorry, I wasn't at the Good Friday service. It's just too sad. It's just too dark. I'm not going to do it. You'd rather just come up for the resurrection." And I was like, but the resurrection doesn't mean anything unless you go through the death first, unless you go through the suffering. Like that shadow work. That's another way that Buddhism gave me eyes to see the deep wisdom of how that story in the Christian tradition has to progress, to be meaningful.
So true.
The thing I love about some of these alternative practices is this embracing and respecting and appreciating the shadow and what it's teaching us, right? Like
Yeah.
welcoming in fear, welcoming in anger, and just sitting with it and allowing ourselves to ask, what are you teaching me? What am I learning through this? Not whereas in Christianity, in certain sectors, it's shame and you're bad and you're a sinner and we don't want to be any of those things. We just want to be the good Christian. And it doesn't allow us to sit with those really hard, heavy feelings and welcome them in and allow them to teach us what we need to learn to grow. And that's one thing I love about, some of these other practices is it actually allowed me to sit with my anger, to sit with my fear, to sit with my sadness and heal through that, because the only way out really is through.
Yeah. And they
Gosh,
all belong,
bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this too, right? Like I remember reading Tara Brach's book, Radical Acceptance, really changed me. That was like the first book that I was like, oh damn, like I really am the source of most of my suffering. Me, right? Because I am trying to out faith this or out spiritual this. And like, literally, I thought the way to navigate through life was the avoidance of pain. Like, if I can avoid pain, then I will remain happy. And like, boy, the joke's on me, right? And this
Yeah.
concept of radical acceptance is like, it all belongs, not just the good times, right? Can you keep talking about like, okay, number one is suffering. Teach us about
Yeah.
the other ones. I'm so curious.
So I'm not the one to teach this. I will certainly mess this up as far as so Buddhism is all lists. So it's
Yeah,
all
totally.
chanting, memorizing lists. But yeah, that's the Four Noble Truths as sort of the foundation of the Buddhism that Thich Nhat Hanh teaches anyway, or taught me, is like, there is suffering. Acknowledge it, see that it's there. Don't try to avoid it. Don't try to get out of it. Number two, take a look at what is watering the seeds of that suffering. Like there are causes, there are reasons that suffering is there. Sometimes there's the reasons we can't do anything about that we just have to like sit with and accept that. Number two, like look at the causes. What's watering the seeds of that suffering? Number three is essentially stop watering the seeds of that suffering. Look deeply into it, figure out what's watering those seeds, stop doing what waters those seeds. And then number four, he calls it the Eightfold Path, which is like, these are the practices that water seeds of well-being. Focus on those, practice those. And he'll call that the way out of suffering, which I think is a dangerous way to talk about it, right? Because you're suffering proof yourself. Although he might make a distinction between like pain and suffering. He would say like, yeah, you will continue to have pain, but you're not going to suffer about it.
Right.
Where he'll say,
Yeah.
there's the illustration of you're someone who's been shot with an arrow. There's the problem that you have an arrow sticking in you. And then there's the additional problem that you have all these stories you're telling about how there shouldn't be. And about who shot this, is this going to hurt long term? This shouldn't be here. He's like, if we can just forget the stories are where the suffering comes in. Pain is enough
So
on its
true.
own.
That's
Like
so true.
deal with the pain. Yeah, no, Thich Nhat Hanh in The Heart of the Buddha's Teachings, that was my like intro into it. He writes a lot about the Four Noble Truths, that I found that incredibly helpful.
Love a good framework. I'm deciding, I'm like, I really like this like 4-step process,
Yeah, that's another like, I don't know if y'all have gotten super into Enneagram, but like my Enneagram
yeah,
5
for sure.
brain, I
Yeah.
need it.
You like data and
please.
analytics.
Give me a theory to
Yeah.
work with, and then I can like practice in the
Totally.
safe framework of that theory.
Totally. But
Uh,
like think about how like many nuances there are with individuals, right? And like that's why spirituality needs to not be so rigid. It needs to be fluid because like the way that our brain works, the way that we interact, our personalities, the way that we view the world through different lenses, like it's not going to be a one size fits all. And like that brings me to a question I want to ask you because what do you think okay, so now that you've like studied Buddhism, what do you think Jesus's goal for us was? Or like what was the point of him coming here?
yeah. That's so good.
Just an easy, light question
I
today, Zach,
love
for
this
you to
question. I think
answer.
about this question all the time because it comes back to like, who gets to decide who's a Christian and who's not? That question is related to me because that's the question of like, what is the telos? Like, what is the end goal of Christianity? Is it to know the right things? Is it to be righteous enough, like to be clean enough? Or it, like what I see in it, is it to bear the fruits of the Spirit? Like that became my standard when I entered into this mystical space. Is it was good enough for Paul and it's good enough for me. Like, are we bearing the fruits of the Spirit? Look at the fruits we're bearing and ask ourselves, like, what is, what is contributing to that or suppressing that? When I hear that question, I think that the end goal of Christianity is to water those seeds of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, etc. And I think that if we can be more honest about what our telos is, like what our end goal is when it comes to how we relate to Christianity, it would clear up a whole lot. But it's very difficult for us to be honest about that because I think some people, for them to allow themselves to get really honest, it gets down to the end goal of Christianity for me is to avoid feeling difficult feelings. To
Yes.
feel like I'm really right about something, I can cling on to that, and I don't have to feel the fear and the sadness and everything I'm
Yes.
stuffed down. Or others, if they're really honest, would say the goal of Christianity for me is to maintain my status, to maintain my power, my socioeconomic, strata. Um, so I think that question really cuts through a lot. Is like, what is this end goal of Christianity, of spirituality? And it opens up, if I say the end goal of Christianity for me is to water those seeds of the fruits of the Spirit, then other traditions can help me in that. There's nothing to be afraid of. My only discernment, tool and
Yes.
standard is like what helps and what doesn't. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, yes, right? Like that's the litmus test, right? Is like, and I think too, Jesus showed us who God really is, I think. Like, I mean, that's like my personal opinion. And if we can remember based on his model, we could in some ways experience heaven here and now, right? Like, what is it really like to live a day full of love and happiness and joy despite what's
Mhm.
around us and what goes on every day? Like, can we make it back to peace? Can we make it back to love? And if we can, like, I'm guessing like that's a pretty good goal to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
you're right. It's not. It's so nebulous and unclear. And I think like the complexity and like where we've chosen to focus modern day Christianity, I don't even really see Jesus anymore or any fruits of the spirit in a lot of the case. So it's like, what is the point? What is the goal?
Mhm.
And when we strip back the layers, it's like, is this fueling love or is this fueling hatred? And like, if that's not crystal clear, I would argue like that would welcome some introspection and some curiosity of like, what are we seeking and what are we following? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it was about healing. It was about truth. It was about acceptance and love. And if our actions through Christianity are devoid of that, maybe the biggest goal is just trying to remember, how to get back there. I don't know. So what was the Buddha's goal, would you say? Like or
The
like
end
what
of the end of suffering. He's very clear about that.
okay.
Okay.
That there's this fantastic story that I think about all the time where like this philosopher, theologian, comes to the Buddha's disciples and asks this very existential question about like, what counts as existence? Do things, does this both exist and not exist? It's a very heady question. And the disciple is like, I don't honestly, like, I'll take you to the Buddha, ask him that question because I don't know. And he takes him to the Buddha. This philosopher asks the question, and the Buddha literally says nothing. He does not answer. And like eventually, this philosopher comes to this conclusion. He's like, oh, he doesn't know anything. Forget it, and like gets up and leaves. And the disciple is like humiliated. It's like embarrassed. It's like, you embarrassed me in front of the philosopher. And the Buddha says the question he was asking had nothing to do with dealing with his own suffering, and therefore I'm not interested. So he had this very clear, like, the way the path like is always about dealing with your suffering and watering the seeds of well-being. If the question doesn't move us in that direction, it's really not worth exploring, and I'm not interested. Uh, which,
It's so good.
yeah,
And it's so true. Just in my own experience, it's just amazing when we start healing and we start dealing with the suffering that we're lugging around. It really does allow us to see the world in a whole new way. I don't say this lightly. When I started healing and becoming more spiritually aligned and working through things, I literally saw life different. I showed up different. I started interacting with people different. Like my whole worldview completely changed because I was willing to work through and heal. And like you said, start watering the seeds of well-being. And
yeah,
it's like such good,
right. It's
good
it's
advice
almost
that can
like,
change the world, you know?
yeah, almost like the kingdom of heaven isn't out there or somewhere in the future, but at hand. Like
Yes.
who could have thought?
Oh,
uh,
oh my.
yeah,
It's like Jesus told us, and we just were like,
I
"Oh my
know,
gosh,
right?
that's such a cute recommendation." But
Yeah.
anyway,
But what he really
yeah.
meant was,
Yeah.
I loved what you said earlier about, the degree to which heaven is now. We're in it. I love the show, The Good Place. Have y'all ever seen The Good Place?
No,
No.
but it's on my
Oh,
list.
first of all, yeah, bump it up the list.
Okay,
Okay. Top
Fantastic
list.
show. So a little spoilery, but for the sake of this conversation, like there comes a point where they get to, heaven. And when they get to heaven, what they find is a world in which everyone can have whatever they want all the time. There's no more pain, there's no more suffering, etc. And everyone there is a miserable zombie. Where like, so you get whatever food you want, that's great for the first 100 years. And
Yep.
then it's all just like nothing. And so like the idea is it's not about the circumstances, it's about the lens through which you see it. And they're like, okay, let's retool heaven. Like, what is heaven? And they wind up coming to this place of we have to help people be able to engage reality without a sense of attachment or aversion, just engaging with like love and gratitude and appreciation, and then they can enjoy heaven. So like the idea is like you can get to heaven, but is your spirit in a place where you can even enjoy it? There's
Oh,
this
Yeah.
like great old SNL skit where it's like, I think it's Adam Sandler, where it's like a advertisement to come and hike. He runs a resort, and he's like, "We can give you opportunities to hike. We cannot make you the kind of person who likes hiking." Uh, like that's what I think of. I can bring you to heaven. I
Yes.
can't make you the kind of person who's gonna know what to do with it.
Yeah.
that's so interesting. It's like the concept of like you follow yourself everywhere, right? Like,
Yeah,
are
wherever you
you
look,
just
there you are.
Yeah.
yeah,
There you are. Yes.
exactly. Here's I love your perspective on reincarnation.
Yeah, I love it. So I get excited. I did a sermon on this a little while back because it's so exciting to me to talk about. Again, so I'm allergic to any kind of like this is the way it is. This is certainty, But I'm very interested in what do these stories do to us. And so the idea of reincarnation, of like we get to do this as many times as we need to until we get it, that has a profound impact on how I relate to myself and I relate to my life. I am able to, go at it with more of a sense of ease and more of a sense of courage. Back to the good place again, like what they wind up creating in this afterlife system is like a simulation. And they'll run you through the simulation as many times as you need to run through it in order to learn to live with equanimity and with love. And then you're ready for heaven, is essentially it. And so like that is how I understand reincarnation. And that story and the way like Ram Dass teaches it is he'll say like, this is the curriculum, like this is the game. And there are some things that it might take you 100,000 lifetimes to understand. And so the bad news is, you're in this curriculum right now. You're enrolled in the course. You got to go through it with all the suffering involved, whatever it takes to help you let go. The good news is there's no shortage of time for you to figure this out. We're all going to get there. And I think that's profoundly beautiful. One of my favorite movies ever is Groundhog Day, because
Same.
it gets to that for me. Like you're stuck in this same day for, I don't know, 100,000 years. How many times does it take to live this one ordinary day before you get it? That's
Mm-hmm.
reincarnation over and over and over. But so I'm curious how you relate to that. Like, how have you clearly you're interested in this, in reincarnation.
For sure, Rach,
It's
you go.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, it was something that I'm kind of like you, and that I'm always really open and just admit that I really have no idea how it works. And I think trying to convince ourselves that we can possibly understand everything about God is laughable, right? Like his
Yeah.
ways are so beyond ours. So I was open to it, and I really for a long time like didn't know how I felt about it. I actually met with a woman who did what's called the Akashic Records. Have you ever heard of this?
Mm-mm.
So anyway, it's the idea is that every soul has a book, and that they are able to access this library essentially of soul records. And so your soul has a record of all of your past lives, and through that you are able to gain information about maybe, where you need to heal, or what your purpose might be, or
Yeah.
whatever. And that was the first time that I kind of started thinking about it. And then I read Ainsley McLeod's book, which is about soul age.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, like, that there are different soul levels, and that we progress through this kind of system, and we come back over and over and over. And same thing, you could have 100 lifetimes at one level before you move on to the next. And that essentially it's our soul learning. And then when we get to a certain elevated point, we are ready to move on and go to the other realm. And then we become helpers to people down here doing the same thing. Um, and I don't know, I'm like you, I think there's something really beautiful about that. So I don't know. It almost makes more sense to me,
Mm-hmm.
versus like, okay, you got one shot and
Yeah.
then you just go to this other place. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still kind of like noodling on it, but I think for me it makes a lot of sense. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's for you, and I resonate with this. Like, it's not about knowing, and it's not about knowing what
Yes.
Do I believe it? Do I not believe it? It's about the effect it has on you right now, and whether that
Yeah.
effect is in line with the telos. Of what
Yeah.
does it help you bear that fruit?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
But Jace, you share your
Okay, well, so
perspective.
I'm on a journey with this right now. I'll tell you. So like I'll be honest, like the thought of past lives. So okay, okay. I believe in reincarnation, but I will say as part of my deconstruction process, I had a lot of fear around it. So like in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, I really like the idea of like, okay, we die, we go to this place and my family's all together and we all hang. We got this cute little house with a pond and we're just in the spirit world, living it up. It's just neat and tidy. The end, right? I like the thought of that. But through experiences, my perspective has shifted. Like I did a past life regression where it was so real. It was so real that it's really hard for me to decouple that from like, okay, that didn't happen. When it's like very clearly like I'm remembering something that happened. And it was a situation where it was my son, my second oldest son, and I. We were both male in this lifetime, and we were like on this mission together to do something. And it was obviously not a mother son relationship, it was brothers. And it was very clear to me that we were brothers and we had this like extraordinary bond. And we were going to be replicating a similar thing in this lifetime, which is bringing forward um, his story of transformation and healing. And he is here to go through this and wake up people around him. And I am here to tell his story, right? Like it was
Mm.
just very clear that that lifetime I was being showed something that is now a parallel in this lifetime. So it's almost like, for me personally, my spirituality and my shifts and my thought change very rapidly based on an experience that it could not be more real to me. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's what's shaped my opinion. And I'm also like I've heard this theory recently where I'm like, okay, like maybe I like this idea. Is that like part of your soul stays? And that could be like your higher self or an energy that's also guiding you through this lifetime. So you're never fully gone from that space. So like, if your mom passes, there's a part of you that's there. And then it's like and I'm like, whatever it is, it's perfect. And I have come kind of full circle in like not needing to know all the answers because to me, that's where safety was. Like, okay,
Mm.
I need to know that I'm going to go to
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
heaven and my family's going to
Mm-hmm.
go to heaven. And like my grandmother, like I love her so much. Like I was so close to her. She was so concerned about all of us being saved because to her, like the thought of not being with us after was excruciating to her. And now I'm like, oh no, we'll be together through all time, all space. You cannot separate love. And I think that to me is where I found the deepest comfort of like, I don't know all the answers and how it's going to work out. I know my mind's going to be blown in the best way, but all I really know is how real love is, right? And like that
Yeah.
experience is like I feel her now. I feel her now. So it's like how do I reconcile that? Like I've had very clear visions and experiences of her visiting me and letting me know that she's here. She's here. So I don't know. I'm still working through it, but like I do
Yeah.
like the idea of it.
We
Like,
all are.
yeah. But I'm like, can I take a gap year? Like I'm freaking tired. Like maybe if I come back, like I just like chill for a little bit. Like I don't know. You guys
Before
do
my next reincarnation.
Yeah,
Just a quick break.
just
Just a
like
quick break
Yeah.
on a cloud for a while.
a quick, cute little sabbatical on a beach somewhere. You guys do a
Yeah.
couple 100-year rotations. I'll meet up with you in the
chill.
next turn.
Right. Can I just do a traditional heaven just for a minute? Just give
Yeah,
me
yeah. A resting point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a cool. It's because it's true. It's like all like a lot of spiritualities, like indigenous cultures and all of that. Like it's a no brainer. It's like to them, it's like
Mhm.
reincarnation and this thought of this lesson, this curriculum, and even reaping what you sow. I never see that as a negative thing. More so like lessons upon lessons upon lessons,
Mhm.
and maybe Earth is like school of hard knocks. Like seems like there's
Yeah.
a lot of suffering here and a lot of pain. But if we could somehow continue to bring us back to that place of love, like, maybe we're in the toughest curriculum. I don't know. I can't imagine it's like a lot
Yeah.
harder than here, but maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see, I
Careful what you
guess.
wish for. Yeah. That makes me think about I have these all kinds of different stories in tension, right? Of like, there's this story in which this is the curriculum and we're learning your reincarnation through reincarnation. And then there's also this practical secular Buddhist approach that would say if the universe is an ocean, we're all waves on this same ocean. We are different incarnations of the universe. A flower grows out of the dirt, it lives its life, and then it decomposes and goes back to the dirt, right? And then those same elements in that same dirt will then go on to form another flower that
Mm.
goes through the same thing. And maybe that has fruit that I eat, and then it's part of me. And so a teacher in that tradition would say, like, yeah, on a very practical level, we're always reincarnating. I'm going to die, my elements are going to return to the base elements where they are,
Mhm.
and then go on to form something else. And so that
Yeah.
creates this image of the universe that's incredibly interdependent, where at a certain point, the lines between us get real fuzzy.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I technically I am you and you are me and we're
Yeah,
all the universe.
That's the one that's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so like that
Yeah.
creates this world where like, if we're all the universe, Ram Dass will say like, we're all God in drag.
Yes, I
Like
know, I
we
love that
are the
expression.
universe having these specific experiences. You talk about, your grandmother wanting to be with you, be with family members, where it's like the universe is putting on a puppet show where like, here's me and here's my grandma. And they're both worried they're not going to be with each other, but they're both me, right? When I take both of them off, it's all the universe all the time. And so there's this great unitive, interdependent oneness to it all that also is just very beautiful to me.
Yeah.
I have goosebumps.
So well said.
I know. It's and I think
It's
what's
so
cool about
beautiful.
the mystical exploration of Christianity too is allowing room for those theories and those thoughts. And it's like where the magic really sits. I
Yeah.
feel like
Mhm.
we've just sort of extracted all the rules and regulations and the blueprint to heaven. And it's just like, gosh, what does it do to us when we're willing and free to explore? I think like daily life can be magical. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like my grandmother came to me during a Reiki energy healing. Okay. Like I went because I felt like my nervous system was all out of whack. I was super stressed. My body was like bossing me around. Because like sometimes for me, if I'm in that space, meditation's really hard. I almost need some physical touch to get my mind where it needs to be. So I almost treat it like a meditation. And, she very vividly came to me in that space. And I just like had this realization. I was like, oh my gosh, of course, we're all just energy. And I've just gotten myself on a different energetic place where she can come in and say hi to me. Oh, duh. Like, this we're not separate, and there isn't this earth and heaven. Like somebody gave an analogy too. Like imagine you're in this video game and you're watching your avatar play this life, and then your avatar just boom gets hit by a bus. You don't get stressed about that because like that's not really you, right? Like that's you playing you, but like the idea of us just being all interconnected and all energy and like really just all coming from the same place and I am you and you are me, like that is like a mind-bending concept. But I feel like that's where faith feels so expansive because now we're like letting it out of the box. And when we let it out of the box, I really feel like God shows up in really unique ways to be like, I
Yeah.
told you I wasn't what you thought I was, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when like really cool stuff can happen.
I also think that whole idea of interconnectedness helps us love people the way Jesus wanted us to love. Because if I am
Mhm.
you and you are me,
Yep.
so often it's our theology that we cling to that divides us and makes us like angry with each other,
Yeah.
and it brings us back to where we're supposed to be, which is unified and whole and loving with each other,
Right.
Totally.
respectful.
Right. And we get
Yeah.
this, the instruction, love your neighbor as yourself. But relating on that level shows you your neighbor is yourself.
Is you.
That's how you do it. Once again,
Yeah.
it's how you catch the snake.
I know.
I think though that
So
is
good.
why we feel such peace through a meta meditation. Okay. Cause like
Mm-hmm.
you are, okay. So I was thinking a lot about this. So, and neuroscience supports this. They've done like obviously the physical benefits of what meditation does for us, right? But when you're thinking about sending love to the person that you're feeling a lot of angst around, like, and meditating in general, you have a lot of physical benefits from doing that. Like, and I think it's because you're literally sending positive energy to yourself, but you think it's to somebody else, right? Like that to
Yeah.
me makes more sense than not. I don't know. We'll never figure it
Yeah.
out, but it's fun. It's fun
Yeah.
to
It's fun
pontificate.
to,
No, I don't.
yeah.
And I will say, like, so, I work professionally as a chaplain, and going through, chaplaincy training and exploring this relationship between our spirituality and our physicality. They're connected in ways that, people go like, oh, it's all woo woo, that's, letting go of anger is not going to affect me spiritually. Like in the same way that if you're stressed and you're anxious, you might have heart palpitations or you feel like you get acid reflux or something like that. That's
Mm-hmm.
happening all over the place all the time in ways
Mhm.
that we're not trained to be aware of. So like there
Yeah.
are some times where like if you have this health issue, don't roll your eyes if someone's like, let's explore the spiritual like reason what might have manifested as this issue. It's all connected. And
Yes.
again,
Just
that's
read this study that like you can talk to a body. Say you have like chronic pain in your wrist. If you talk like the I mean, like I can't imagine like the people that sign up for this. They're like, okay, what kind of study am I in? But they found that
Yeah.
they're like, can I
Okay.
actually do like the one that just has me pop a pill? They send like not it was like they spoke to the ailment. They literally would just I think it was like 90 days. I'll find it and I'll link it in the show notes. But they send thoughts to that area and they found just as much relief from
yeah,
that versus taking pain medication. Like they're like science is catching up. But the funny thing you're saying about woo woo, like Jesus was the most woo woo. Like I don't like people like say it like it's such a like heretical thing. It's like the dude healed people with his
yeah,
hands and he told us that it's our belief that heals
yeah,
us and makes us whole. Like it's our thoughts and our emotions that heal us, right? Like it's just I don't know. This stuff obviously gets me super jazzed up, but like I love I love this conversation because it allows us to see Jesus and his teachings and what you're saying, Rach. It's almost like we go through this like quantum leap. It's like all of a sudden you look at something with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective and it unlocks like this very deep teaching
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we were not brave enough to explore before. And that's where like Jesus is. He's like, I'm in the
Yeah.
deep, come on down. Will you tell us about your book?
yes, I will. Oh, and there it is.
Ah!
Yes. So that book, that was born out of this experience of me hearing Jesus's teachings in the mouths of teachers from other traditions. And I wanted to explore that and see what that looks. So this book is a re-narration of the Jesus story. And it has him as this very like sharp and witty and radical person who like is dealing with the religious trauma and deconstruction of being brought up in this legalistic tradition that has pushed him to the margins for several reasons, but if nothing else, like historically, because there's this question and stigma around like who his father is, right? So like that's enough for him to be as a character. What does it do to a kid, in this world? So it's re-narrating his story as someone who is dealing with that, who winds up leaving Judea and spending a season in a Buddhist monastery. And what does it look like for the Jesus that we know and the teachings that we know to be put on that more vast spiritual landscape? And then, so originally, there are two books. The second one comes out in March. They were one book, and in the middle is where like he leaves the monastery and goes back to Judea, and then we experience like the story that we think we know of the Gospels. I had to break them up into two because it was this big mega book. So this, book one is in this Buddhist monastery. The second book is retelling the gospel stories that we think we know. And, part of that also is as I was a pastor and as I'm preaching these texts and exploring these texts, exploring alternate readings of these texts and more mystical readings of these texts, I started to come across like ways to tell the story that were so much more interesting than the way I had been taught. So for example, like, we know the story of the triumphal entry, right? And, Jesus coming in with the palm branches on the donkey and people singing Hosanna. There, are academics who will say, okay, this is happening very possibly against the backdrop of Pilate riding into town at the same time through a different gate. And he's on a war horse and they're singing battle hymns. And his parade into town is meant to intimidate people at this time of Passover and remind them of their place in light of the Roman Empire, right? And so the triumphal entry becomes a much different story placed against that backdrop. That becomes a much more interesting story as Jesus engaging in this piece of political theater and street art with these spiritual implications. And so every little story like that I picked up, I wanted to put into this narrative to help people engage the Jesus story in a new way, in a new spiritually imaginative way that again waters these seeds of well-being, these seeds of the spirit.
Gosh.
So
good.
cool. I mean, like,
it's so much fun.
Yeah.
yeah, you can tell like you're living your purpose. And I think that
Thank you.
it's so exciting to see. And people who are, like I said, like I keep using the word brave, but it's true. It's, even suggesting that there are, Buddhist influences in Jesus's teachings or vice versa really activates people. And I think, Rachel and I have been at this long enough to know, like, it doesn't matter what you say. People are just always going to hear what they think that they're going to hear, right? Like it's just reinforcing maybe some beliefs. But I also see people that are so hungry for a different narrative and a different story that connects with what they know inside. Like, I think what the biggest lie is that we have to detach from our inner knowing and that we need a gatekeeper to God and we need a liaison to God. And I think a lot of people are waking up and they're saying, like, I don't know, like when I connect to God directly and when I connect directly to the spirit of Jesus, but then I look around, it feels devoid of that energy, right? And this is just giving such light and breath into perhaps like what it is. That's the thing. It's like, I understand that this is fiction, but like none of us really know. And just opening up the possibility to alternatives and having that bring us closer to the spirit of God is like such a beautiful thing. So so cool and unique.
Thank you. I hope that it does that, and I hope you enjoy it.
So excited to read it.
I'm
And
excited to read it.
yeah, and it's cool because we have a couple weeks until this airs. So it gives us time to read it.
And we have a break over Christmas.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I always like to have a good read while I'm having a little family time. It's great.
I hope you don't read it and then you're like, oh, this is all, I was so wrong about this.
No.
We should never endorse this book.
Absolutely not. I can already tell your
No.
energy is so pure.
Yeah.
But like, have you ever thought about doing a children's book?
I have. When my kids were younger, I say younger, they're 8 and 10. They're still very young. But when they were younger and I was still in more traditionally Christian spaces, and I felt so much tension around the kind of kids books that we had, where I was always feeling like while I was reading it, I was like, oh, how do I nuance this?
Yeah.
This does not feel good. I think that there are probably more wise resources available now. But all that to say, since I've stepped out of that space, I don't feel the pressure to like read my kids Christian children's books, and so that hasn't been on my mind. But it absolutely was for a while I was doing that and
Yeah.
feeling like, oh, surely there's something better. Like,
I do think it would help our children be critical thinkers about Jesus by just having something like having a childlike framework to work through this. So I don't know if you have nothing going on, Zach, which I know you're very bored.
Yeah.
You're very bored.
right. I'm
And all
just
that
sitting
free
here
time.
wondering, like, what should I do
Yeah.
next?
Yeah.
Do you guys know Godly Play at all as a
Mm-mm.
curriculum? Oh my gosh. Be
Writing this
ready
Sounds
for
like
your
we
life
need to
to be
know
changed.
about it. Godly play.
So,
Godly play.
Godly Play and Out of the Box are two that I would recommend. So it's a storytelling curriculum, and Godly Play is specifically for children, where they will take Bible stories and kind of they create a space in which you act them out, like you tell the story, and you have these like little toys or figures that you tell the story with, and the story is usually pretty brief and pretty minimalistic. And then where the magic happens is like with the kids, after you tell the story, you say, okay, what did you notice about that? What stood out to you? What
Love
did you
this.
not like about that?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself in this story that we've just told? And so it teaches kids to engage these stories as fields of play and fields to get to know their own spirituality better and explore that and what that means. And there's no like doctrinal rigidity to it. Like, did this really happen? Is not a question that this storytelling curriculum is interested in. And then where Out of the Box is really cool is that kind of that's more for adults to engage, and it's not just Christian tradition stories; it's all kind of wisdom tradition stories. But yeah, I have a lot of respect for that approach to children's formation and Christian spaces.
That is
That sounds
so
awesome.
cool. Because
Yeah.
I
I'm
like
gonna
I
check
love
that out for sure.
that it helps them like experience it and then they reflect on it because
And
that's really
reflect.
yeah, because like
Yes.
that critical thinking is so important because then that's
Mhm.
how you discern the truth and you
Yeah.
discern the true voice of God versus like the quote unquote voice of God. And man, kids have such wisdom too, right? Like,
So
yeah, because
cool.
it's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're not indoctrinated yet. They're not fully
Right.
influenced yet. I think like as parents too, we're struggling. We're trying to figure out like how do we not fully abandon Jesus when we don't like what's going on in Christianity? We get DMs
Yeah, it's true.
regularly when we communicate that we're two moms raising kids of faith, and they're like, yeah, but like I don't
How do you do it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you know, how
I
do we do
know.
this?
Yeah. And that's where I think I felt that tension with a lot of kids' books. A kid's book, I think, has a baked in morality to it, a moral at the end of the story. And so this story is about such and such, versus what I love about Godly Play or Out of the Box is they try to tell the story without a moral to it. They're just like, here are the events that happened. What do you see in this? And like, let the kid find their own moral
Yeah.
and meaning in this story. It's a meaning making activity, which encourages that imagination, which is very different than what I got, which was like Bible drill, right? Memorize
Mhm.
them. They are true,
Yeah. No, I
Absolutely.
love that. I love that. I'm gonna look at that.
Zach,
Oh my
you're
gosh, this was
awesome.
such a great
Y'all are
conversation.
awesome. I'm so grateful for this space. You guys
It
do
was
such great work. I'm grateful to be here and be a part of it.
Oh my gosh,
No,
we're
you're
just
you're awesome.
thrilled
It's
and honored to have you here. Like you bring
totally.
so much light and freedom and love and truth to people. So thank you for everything you put out there. It's just a
Thank you
lot
for
of
saying that.
goodness on your
Yes.
page, which is what we need.
Yes,
Thank you.
100%.
And I echo that back to you. The work that you do, the questions you ask, the conversations you facilitate are so beautiful and so spiritually freeing. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you're ready to take your spirituality to the next level, be sure to check out our website, spiritoutspoken.com. There you can download free educational resources, read our latest blog posts, and join the Spirit Outspoken community.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Spirit Outspoken to stay up to date on news, happenings, shenanigans, and all things Spirit Outspoken.